Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to do some pork chops with roasted acorn squash, Brussels sprouts and bacon, and a creamy cheesy polenta. So let's start. Oh, and we're going to bake up one of my quick challah bread loaves that I have proofing in the oven right now. But our first order of business is we need to get our acorn squash in the oven roasting. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut them in half. And you're going to cut them in half like the upwards way. Don't cut them the long way. That way, when you put them down on the baking sheet like this, it seals in the moisture and the heat and cooks it faster and keeps it lovely and tender. Let's scrape out our seeds. Here we go. And just get all of those seeds out of there. And with the trick with this is you don't do anything with seasoning up until the very end after it's roasting. You're just going to bake these as is on a baking sheet. And then at the end, my favorite way to do this is a little bit of butter, garlic salt, and brown sugar. So you've got that sweet and savory flavor. Here we go. So we've got these two scooped out. And let's get our next one, which is quite large, actually. Sometimes you get these acorn squashes, and they're just huge. There we go. And get our seeds out of here as well. And I do have my oven preheated to 400 degrees, so we're going to roast these at 400 degrees until the very end of our stream. Luckily with these is you can actually roast them for any good amount of time and they stay well in the oven, so they don't like overcook easily. And my trick for knowing when they're done is when you grab them and they have a little bit of give, so they're soft, that's when you know they're nice and cooked up. Okay, we've got our squash all scooped out here. Feel like I've got the seed jackpot over here. And we're going to lay these on our baking sheet. And again, the way to cook them so that they stay really moist inside and cook up faster is you're going to put them face down, like our inside down on our cutting or our baking sheet. You don't need to grease it up or anything like that because the natural moisture in there is going to seal it in. And this is going to allow it to cook in half the time of roasting them face up. Just think about how like a pressure cooker works. That's how it's kind of going to do it. So we've got these in here. I have those baking on 400 degrees. And again, these can cook anywhere between 30 to 45, 50 minutes. You can leave them in there without them getting overcooked. So that's kind of the beauty of the squash here. Our next thing that we're going to work on is our cheesy polenta. And I don't know why it's so funny, but I did. Okay, what we're going to do is we are going to bring, I don't know why I grabbed that open yet, but we're going to bring 2 cups of milk and 2 cups of water to a boil. And then we'll add in 1 cup of polenta. And we will cook it over low heat, but we're going to first bring it to a boil on high. And then we'll add our polenta in, and at the very end, we'll add our cheese in. So 2 cups of water, 2 cups of milk with 2 cups of water. Here. And this is going to thicken up really well, but it's not going to be dense. It's going to be actually pretty light and fluffy. So I've got my 4 cups in there. We're going to bring it to a boil. Once again, it gets to a boil, we'll add in our polenta, salt, and a little bit of butter. And then at the very end, our cheese. Okay.
So you have a question. Is polenta like mashed potatoes?
No, it's not like mashed potatoes. It's corn-based. So the best way that I can really, think of it, it's actually very similar to grits. Grits are typically white corn, polenta is yellow corn, but they can be intermixed. Polenta is a finer ground than grits, and you cook it longer so that it's more soft, but it has that light, airy fluffiness to it. We grab this bowl out because we're going to make our seasoned mixture for our pork chops that we're going to kind of do a nice little dry rub on them. For this, we're going to start out with, let me grab my brown sugar over here. Some brown sugar to give a nice little sweetness to our pork chops, but it's going to pair really well with our kind of Cajun spices and more earthy ones. So I'm going to put in 1/4 of a cup of brown sugar. And this is because I'm using 6 pretty big pork chops. And you want to have a thick cut pork chop for this. You don't want a thin one on there. So we've got about a tablespoon or 1/4 of a cup of brown sugar. And then we are going to use about 1.5 teaspoons of chili powder. So I'm going to just kind of shake that in there. 1.5 tablespoons of paprika. There we go. 1.5 tablespoons of oregano. And what we're going to do is we're going to make like a dry rub with this, and we're going to rub this over our pork chops. And then we're going to do about 1.5 teaspoons of our like Cajun or Creole seasoning. So I'm using Tony Chachere's, but you can really use any one. We're just going to use up the rest of it because there's not much left in there. And then just a little bit of black pepper, not much, like 1/2 teaspoon. Then we're going to use about 1 teaspoon of garlic salt because my Tony Chachere's already has some salt base into it, so we don't need much. And then we're going to use some, you can use onion powder, but I have some chopped up dried onions, which will work as well. Now we're going to use, I'm going to put in about, I want to say 1 tablespoon of this. This is going to be the base for our delicious kind of seasoning for our pork chop. I'm just going to use my hands here and really kind of mix it up for this. And you just want to make sure all those spices kind of get mixed around. Here we go. And then just going to do a little switch with my cutting boards here and bring my pork chop one up here. Now, before I kind of coat this with them, I am going to drizzle them with a little bit of Worcestershire, which I forgot to grab out, but do not worry, I have it nearby. And we're going to do just a light drizzle. I don't want to get it too soaking wet, so just, again, a light drizzle on it. But I love the Worcestershire as it's going to break down the natural fat in these pork chops. And now the best way to really do this is to just do it with your hands. And we are going to pat this mixture down on top of our pork chop. And then we will flip it over, and we're going to do the exact same on the other side and really coat it up. Because this is going to give you sweet, a little bit of a spice to it. We've got those earthy flavors from the chili powder and that savory flavors from, the paprika. And you have the oregano, which all kind of blend really well together. Okay, so we've got our first one is, now I'm just going to flip these guys over. And these are quite thick pork chops, but they are going to be delicious. Okay. Just trying to stick with keeping my clean hand here. Again, we're going to do a light drizzle. Don't drench it because you don't want your pork chops to get too wet on here because you want them to really bind with these spices. So again, just a nice light drizzle over each one. And then we're going to go back in with these ones. So I'm going to just sprinkle it all over, and then I'll start patting once. I just want to make sure it gets evenly spread out between them all. Okay. And we'll coat it up. And as they kind of sit there, those flavors will soak in. They'll kind of hydrate up those spices as well. And then we'll get to sauteing them off here in a little bit. But we're going to let them start to hydrate a little bit. Here we go. And again, good pat all the way around. Okay, I'm going to go wash my hands. And I'm going to just we'll do our carousel again. I'll put this towards the back. And let's start prepping up our bacon for our Brussels sprouts and bacon. We'll saute up our pork chops. So it's kind of like a Cajun brown sugar kind of glaze on the pork chops. I don't need a full pound of bacon for my Brussels sprouts and bacon. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut in half. I'll save my other half for another day. And then with my kitchen shears here, I'm going to snip my pieces in here and just start kind of cooking them off, because we will cook our Brussels sprouts in the bacon. And they'll be absolutely delicious. This is like my husband's favorite way to have Brussels sprouts. And I think it's because the bacon really like comes through on it. So I think he forgets he's eating a vegetable. So just snip these up. I find it's much easier to just snip your bacon than it is to get out a cutting board and cut it with a knife. Because bacon, when it's not like, it's very like stretchy. So cutting with a knife can always be tricky, but kitchen shears do a miraculous job with this. Here we go. And I'm trying to make sure that I'm not getting any huge pieces of bacon, more just cutting it, at crazy angles, but making sure nothing is too big, because you don't want to have massive chunks of bacon. You're essentially making bacon bits that we will then saute our Brussels sprouts in. Okay, I'm gonna go wash my hands, and we will get those cooking. Okay. So I'm going to turn on my burner here. And we're going to start it off higher until we have that temperature kind of, increase. And once it starts to really sweat out the fat, then I'll turn it down to a medium, because again, I don't want my bacon to burn, but more sweat out that fat and get crispy. Okay, I can see steam is starting to come off of my our milk and water mixture here. So I'm going to add in my polenta now, because if you wait for it to come to a boil, because there's milk in here, what it says is if it coming to a boil, it's going to come to a nice high foam, and then it can kind of come over. So I just wait until I see that steam, because I know it's nice and hot. And then we're going to add in our polenta. So 1 whole cup in here. And again, polenta is ground up corn. So you're going to see like lots of variations in the coloring, just like you would with dried corn kernels in there. And polenta is yellow versus grits are typically the white ones. Let's grab a little spoon to be stirring this. And just kind of mix it in. And then I'm going to add in a little bit of garlic salt and a little pat of butter to kind of melt with this. Once it starts to come to a nice little boil here, then I'm going to turn it down really, really low. You don't want to cook it very high. You want to cook it very, very low, because you can scald your polenta. So I'm going to add in about a teaspoon or so of garlic salt. And then I've got my butter right over here. We're going to add in our butter. And I don't need much. I'm just going to add in about a tablespoon of butter. Here we go. So now that I have that, let me give my bacon a little bit of cook. And then I'm going to say we can start. Let's look at my quick challah. So this, when we got home, a little after 7, I whipped up a batch of my quick challah, which is kind of a trick to make a nice, beautiful yeast spread in half the time. And what I do to make this is I use a tablespoon of yeast in here instead of the traditional like 2 teaspoons and a half, which allows it to puff up faster, plus a good amount of sugar and honey to really increase that that puff on it. And for this one, I did kind of a more intricate braid. I did a 6-piece braid, which is a kind of a halfway between a like a basket weave. Most of the time, the traditional one, like the basic one, is a 4-string weave on it. So a lot of people, when they make it, they just do like the traditional 3-strand braid, and they're like, why does it never turn out? Because you got to use 4 strands like minimum to get you that nice kind of pretty look to it. Okay, we're gonna brush this with some egg wash. I'm gonna add a little bit of water to this. Whoop, almost tripped over my pad. So just about a teaspoon of water in here. Give this a little stir. And then I see my polenta right here is starting to bubble up. So again, I'm gonna give it a stir because you've got to watch it. Once it starts to bubble is when you know to kind of turn it down so that you don't stick any, like have it scald to the bottom of the pan. So I'm going to turn that down to a medium. Once I see a little bit more bubble, I'm going to bring it back down to a low, and then we'll cover it. So I'm going to just mix up my egg and my water here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this, and this is going to give you this nice shiny color on our, like our quick challah here. And you just make sure you cover the whole thing up with your egg wash for this. And this is one that I have a recipe card out for everybody. This was a freebie that I gave to everybody. So you'll just have to go dig through some of our, posts or whatnot for that recipe card. Because it's such an easy thing that it takes just 1 hour really to get this whole thing ready to bake, and then it bakes up in like 15 minutes. So we're gonna really coat it with our nice kind of mixture, and then you could do lots of different toppings on here, poppy seeds, sesame seeds. You can just keep it plain. My kids really love it with garlic salt, so we'll do a little bit of garlic salt on here. And then a little bit of Parmesan cheese, because what happens is it kind of gets crusty and gives you almost like a garlic bread flavor, but that's one of their just favorite ways to have it. We grab this, and then we're gonna pop this in the oven. But you could do so many little spices on it, and so we're gonna do a nice little sprinkle of our Parmesan cheese over here. There we go. And then we're going to pop this in the oven to bake at 400 for about 15 minutes. This bakes up really, really fast because it is a very light and airy bread. It's a yeast bread, so it is not like sourdough where you actually need a really good amount of cooking time. This one goes fast. What we're going to do is we're just going to rotate our squash. Let me see if I can get them both side by side. No. So we're going to have to put our squash down. Is it going to be fit? Woo, perfect. And then I'll move those back up when we're ready. But bread always goes on top. I'm going to put my timer on for 15 minutes, and then we're ready.
You have a question? Have you made a video for chicken noodle soup yet?
I have a couple videos for chicken noodle soup for there, because I love my chicken noodle soup. So you'll just have to search for it. I've done it a couple of times because that is a family favorite. Anytime anybody is sick in my family, or any of my times my friends are sick, I make a batch of chicken noodle soup. So yes, I have that one. You'll have to do some searching for it, but I definitely have that one in there. So I was gonna say, I've got a lot of videos out there because we've been doing this coming up on 9 months now. We're a little over 9 months. We started this journey in January. And I just decided, I'm like, people have been asking me about recipes and how to cook for a while, and I just finally decided to do it. Okay, you can see our polenta is thickening up. So I'm going to give it a good stir. And now I'm going to turn it down to a low. And we're going to cover it up with my little cover here. And we're going to let it kind of cook. And then the trick with my polenta is halfway through the cooking, I'm going to actually turn it off. And then right before I add my cheese, I turn it back on to kind of heat it up and to get it there. I'm going to turn my bacon down to a 4 now that it's sweated out a lot of its fat, and let it start to kind of cook up here. Here we go. And let's get our Brussels sprouts prepped, and then in a few minutes we'll start actually cooking off our pork chops. So I'll do 3 at a time because I'm not going to be able to fit all 6 in my pan at one time. So I've got my big bag of Brussels sprouts here, but we're not going to use all of them. Here we go. Now, the one thing about Brussels sprouts that is kind of painstaking here is you've got to quarter them. So I kind of cut off their little stalk part and then I quarter them. So it's a lot of little bit of work for it. It's not too bad, but it isn't the most fun, I will tell you.
You have a question? What are you doing with the squash?
The squash, I'm roasting it, and then the way this is one, it's very simple, but it's delicious. We're going to put a little bit of butter, garlic, salt, and brown sugar in it. So it's got this sweet savory to it, and then you just scoop it out and eat it. It's actually my son Torrance, one of his favorite side dishes. He absolutely loves it when I make acorn squash, and I love it. It was one of those first foods, too, I used to make for all of my babies because I'm a little crazy. I made all of my kids' baby food from scratch because it was just something I loved doing. And I made sure they had all the crazy food and spices at a young age, which I think has helped them, for the most part, be pretty adventurous eaters, or at least willing to try things.
What happened with Evie?
Yeah, I don't know what happened with Evie. Evie's my one. Well, I know what happened with Evie, I think. My theory is, so my Evie, she had a kind of a traumatic, crazy birth story. And she was in the NICU for about a month and then was on feeding tubes for about 6 months because she just didn't know how to swallow and kept aspirating into her lungs. So, and she was on one that bypassed and went right into jejunum. So I think that she has just, because she didn't get any nutrition orally that first 6 months of her life, that she now just eats really strange and extreme things. She'll eat lemons and lime straight, loves wasabi almonds, has this crazy flavor palette, but doesn't like anything I cook for the most part, unless it's spaghetti and meatballs, salmon, steak. Those are her things that she'll tolerate. And she's like, when I cook those, she's like, "Oh, Mama, you finally made a good meal." And I'm like, "Kid, you have no idea." But she's also through this stage. I always find that my kids from about 7 to 11 are terrible, picky eaters. After that, they get more adventurous. My kids before that, like Teddy and Jack, eat anything and everything I make. And my older ones will eat anything and everything. But Evie, whew, she is so picky. And she always comes in and she's like, "Oh, that's what we're having for dinner." And I'm like, people would be lining up to eat my food. And she's like, "Well, it's not my favorite." She's a little dramatic. One day she'll appreciate me. My oldest one is just now starting to appreciate me. Here's our bacon that we're crisping up for our Brussels sprouts. I'm going to start heating up some oil right here so that we can start sauteing off our pork chops. But I know Evie will get there one day. My oldest one is just now starting to realize that I'm a pretty decent cook. And she goes to her friend's house and she's like, always come back. She's like, their parents aren't very good cooks. And I was like, well, a lot of people just go through the motions or cook through it or, haven't spent the time to really learn because, with cooking, it's not a challenging skill, but you definitely have to practice it to get better and be willing to go outside of your comfort foods. My big thing that I like to do is I like to have a whole bunch of different foods. I never like to repeat things. I'm pretty adventurous. And I think I grew up pretty adventurous because I have a lot of European influences in my family. Like my mom's from Sweden. And I spent a lot of time in Europe as a kid visiting my relatives in Sweden, Germany, and Spain. And so I got to try cuisines around the whole world. I did a foreign exchange in Germany. And so then I traveled to all the countries around there. And it's just fun when you explore them at a different age and you are got a wider variety and palette in here. Okay, let's see. Still not warm yet. Let me give my my bacon. This is not broccoli. My bacon's getting there. We're getting nice and crispy. Now, my trick with my bacon is I don't want to cook it to where it's like bacon bits crunchy. You want to cook it just a smidge under so that it will be that kind of perfect consistency, because you want it to be crispy and chewy at the same time with it. But look how thick our polenta is getting here. And again, we're cooking it on nice low heat. I find that cooking it in a Dutch oven works really well because it prevents it from scalding. I'm going to mix all of this in right now, all that liquid on the top. And then this is where I'm going to literally let the residual heat continue to cook it. So I'm going to turn it off, but we will turn it back on when we get closer to adding the cheese in. This is going to allow it to cook at a really, really low temperature. And that way you don't kind of burn it on the bottom of your pan, and allows it to get really soft and fluffy. There we go. We'll get these last little Brussels sprouts chopped up on here, and we can start frying up ours. I think it should be just about, you can typically tell because I have just a little bit of oil in here just from the radiant heat that's coming off of the pan when it's hot. You never want to fry your food in cold oil. Cold oil will give you a soggy, not crispy crust. And I want these to sear up and have a lovely kind of crispy crunch on them. Here we go. And on here. So with our Brussels sprouts, I am just quartering them unless they're really small, and then I'm halving them. This is, I find, a perfect happy medium for prepping your Brussels sprouts, in that when you cook them, they'll fall apart because you got to chop off the bottom and then you kind of quarter them. And it's much better than when my sister asked me to prep them. She asked me to always shred each and every leaf off, and it's not fun. Okay, we're dropping our pork chops in. I'm going to pick my 3 fattest ones to go first. And this is because when we take them off, they're going to continue to cook as they rest. And so doing your fattest one first will keep them nice and juicy. So we're just going to do 3 at a time. And with these, I'm going to turn my heat down to about a 5, so right at medium. And these are going to cook for about 3 to 4 minutes on each side on there for this. Okay, let me get my tongs here. Beautiful. So now we've got just about the right kind of crispiness on our bacon here. So we'll add in our Brussels sprouts.
Do you have a request to go over the seasoning for the pork chops?
Yes. So this one, it starts out with 1/4 cup of brown sugar. Then I added in 1.5 teaspoons of chili powder, 1.5 teaspoons of paprika, 1.5 teaspoons of oregano, 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, 1.5 teaspoons of Creole seasoning, and then 1 teaspoon of garlic salt, and about 1 tablespoon of granulated onions or chopped dehydrated onions. So it's gonna have both a savory and like a sweetness to it, which will be just absolutely lovely. Because with pork, I find pork is one of those meats that you can really do more sweet or fruity flavors with it, because it just pairs really well, especially with like apples or that brown sugar barbecue sauce. All works really well with the pork. Okay, I'm going to coat all of my Brussels sprouts here with our bacon grease. And that's what we're going to fry up with it. So I'm just going to pat these guys out. And we're going to let those saute here. And what we're going to do with our my chopped up dried onion, I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of this on, but I'm not going to mix it first because I want the steam from crisping up to hydrate these onion pieces. And we're just going to put in about a tablespoon. And then after these have hydrated, we'll add in a little bit of garlic salt later. But I want these in here so they can hydrate up first. Let me just take a quick peek over here. Okay, perfect timing for that. Okay, let's check on our polenta here. Beautiful. You just see how nice and thick and creamy this is. And we haven't even added in our cheese, which is going to just bring up the flavors. Now, today I'm going to be using Parmesan cheese in it because I think it will pair really well with the pork chops. But you can definitely use cheddar cheese. Gouda is one of my favorite to put in there as well. Kind of think like Gouda grits, Gouda polenta. So good. On here. Okay, I'm going to turn this up just a smidge. I want to let that kind of continue cooking here. And where's let's get my green onions prepped up because we're going to toss our green onions on top of our, at the very end, we'll sprinkle them with a little bit of green onions. So I've just got 3 here. And I'm going to chop these up. And this will just add a nice little fresh onion flavor to our pork chops here. Now, because we use paprika in our seasoning, when I flip our pork chops, they're going to have a dark red on the edge of like a dark brown coloring, because when you cook up paprika, it gets a nice kind of brownish color to it. Let's see. Oh, wrong tongs. Beautiful. We're going to start and let them kind of flip over. But here, how I was talking about how they're going to have a darker color because that's the paprika blackening up in there. There we go. And we're going to let those, again, continue to kind of cook and steam up on here. Let's get our Brussels sprouts tossing in here. Now that they've had a chance to kind of do their first layer of crisping, we're going to mix that that dried onion into it. There we go. Perfect. And then I'm going to again let it sit. We will salt these at the very end for this. Okay. I'm going to taste before we add in our cheese is going to add some more saltiness to our polenta, but it's not going to add a whole lot. So I want to make sure I have the right flavors on here so that I can make sure that it doesn't need more. It's actually perfect. I'm going to add a little bit of pepper though.
You have a couple questions about what is polenta, if you can go over it again.
Yes. So polenta is yellow corn that is ground. Pretty fine. Here, I'll actually show you a little bit outside of my thing. So this is what polenta looks like when it's uncooked. It is a ground yellow corn, which it's not gritty like grits because you cook it a little bit longer. It does have a little bit of a texture, but when you cook it, it gets really, really fluffy. So this was 1 cup of polenta with 2 cups of milk and 2 cups of water. And you can see it's really, really fluffy. So it's going to be a lot lighter than mashed potatoes. And it's a lot, I want to say, lighter than grits as well. Grits and polenta come from like the same family. They're both corn products. But the polenta is softer and fluffier. And a lot of times grits come from yellow or white corn. Okay, we've got all of that. Let's get our bread out. Beautiful. Look at this gorgeous loaf. That nice brown color is coming from that egg wash over. I'm going to check my squash here. Let it cook up a little bit more. And I'm actually going to turn this on to my my air fryer setting so that it bakes up a little bit faster because we're going to be done here in a few minutes. But again, look at this gorgeous bread here. This is our 1 hour challah that we coated with an egg wash, and then we sprinkled garlic salt on it and Parmesan cheese, but it cooks up real fast and is delicious. Okay, and this again is a recipe card that we have free for everybody. So you definitely will have that available. You just have to do some digging. Okay, I'm going to turn, I always do this, I'm going to turn my pork chops on their side. And I know this is an odd method to do, but pork chops, as you can see, they have this fat side, and I really like to cook it up and toast it up so that it cooks up nicely and gets a good crispy texture to it. Only trick is, you know, it's like the leaning wall of pizza here. There we go. So we're going to just let it, you don't need to cook it long on this side, but it's going to give you a lot of great texture on the outside as well as flavor, because these are really hefty pork chops. Beautiful. And then I'm going to flip this over. There we go. And it's also, because they are thick, it's going to allow it to kind of cook in at a slightly like another angle for this. Okay. I'm going to grab my plate here, and beautiful. We're going to set them on here, because when we're done, what we're going to do, when we're done kind of cooking all of this, we're going to put our next round in. But we're going to pop them in the oven for just a few minutes as they kind of cook up. Let's get this next round in, and then we're going to start prepping up our pineapple for our fruit tonight. Here we go. Slide this guy out of the way for this. Okay. I'm going to give this again a good stir. Again, you want to just constantly stir this every so often so that it doesn't stick to the bottom. Let's give our Brussels sprouts a stir. And we are cooking these over 4. As you can see, they're getting nice and vibrant in our like kind of that green color for it. And we're going to add in our cheese in just a few minutes. We're going to add it in towards like the last few minutes so that because it will melt pretty fast, but you don't want it to burn and stick to the bottom. But let me grab my pineapple because I've had it sitting, ripening on my counter for the last couple of days now. So it should be nice and ready to chop up. Because when you buy a pineapple from the store, grab my cutting board, it is never ripe. It's always bright green, and if you cut into it, you're going to have this just pale, not very good pineapple. So the trick is you let it sit on its counter, and it's going to look funky when you're done with it because it's going to look dried out at the top. But you want that because you're going to see how we've got this nice kind of gold coloring forming up brown. That means it's going to be nice and sweet. I'm going to wash off my knife here so it doesn't have an onion flavor to it. And pineapple is one of my kids' favorite fruits. And to buy a whole pineapple, this is $3. To buy it cut up at the store is like $12. So if you just learn how to cut it yourself by taking off the top and the bottom, so just like this to where we have a nice kind of even surface to work with, then you're going to cut it in half and then cut it down right through that core. And by cutting through this core, it is really easy to decore your pineapple. You just cut off that tip of that triangle right there, and that gets out that firm part of your pineapple. It takes me less than 5 minutes to cut up a whole pineapple. That 5 minutes easily saves me, $9, $10, on there. So I recommend it if you want to eat more fresh fruit, but you don't want to waste an arm and a leg on it. Just learn to cut it up yourself, and it's really not that hard. Now, one trick, if you're going to make your pineapple and you're going to keep it, Make sure none of your seeds get into the, if you're not going to eat it that same day, are on there, because those seeds will turn your pineapple brown by the very next day. They'll have big spots. If you're going to eat it all, which we eat a whole pineapple at a meal, then you don't have to worry so much about it. But again, leaving those seeds in there and their little brown black specks, they ripen up just like how apples, if you expose them to air, they'll ripen up really fast and turn brown. So let's get this guy kind of pulled off here. And then I just kind of, again, I cut down my skin off of it, and it allows it to kind of just going along here. You cut it off, and then all you have to do is slice it through here. And it's really easy. But let's get our pork chops a quick flip, and then we're going to mix in, there we go, our cheese in just a second. Okay, delicious. So again, we have that nice kind of darker reddish brown color. Again, that is from the paprika and the brown sugar caramelizing on there. It does not mean that it is burnt, but that when it cooks up, it gets darker. And with each subsequent batch, we're doing in 2 batches, it's going to get a little bit darker because you already have those spices sitting at the bottom of your pan. But don't think that you've ruined your meat doing that. It just means that it's been nice and rich and caramelized. Paprika is one of those spices they use when you get a blackened, like a blackened fish or blackened chicken. That paprika, it's very mild in flavor and savory, but it does toast up and turn a nice kind of dark red when it cooks, because it's already a darker color, which gives you that, blackened color for it. Okay, let's get this, guys. Last one's chopped up here. And again, slide this down. And then we'll have our fruit ready for tonight. We'll put our cheese in our polenta. We will get our pork chops finishing up in the oven for the last 2 to 3 minutes. That just allows them to get their final cook on them. And then we will get our squash prepped up and ready to eat as well. There we go. But again, we've got our pineapple, our fresh fruit. And this, again, just cost me like $3 for my fresh pineapple, instead of spending $12 for it to be made up, cut for you. Okay. Flip these guys real quick. Again, I always like to do this with my really fat pork chops because you have that big fat ring around the side, and this gives it a nice texture and flavor for it. Okay. Beautiful. These are crisping up nicely. I'm starting to get the nice browning here on, I can see if I can pull one up for you guys to see, but you're getting this nice browning on our kind of crispy edges on our Brussels sprouts. So I know they're just about ready. Okay, let's add in our Parmesan cheese. I'm going to add in about a cup of Parmesan cheese. I'm going to turn my heat back up for my back burner now on low, now that that cheese is in there. But again, keep it very, very low. We're going to mix it in. And we're going to let that kind of melt up. And that's going to give you this just delicious, cheesy polenta. And again, I'm using Parmesan, but Gouda is really great with this. Cheddar is great. Really the sky's the limit. You can, whatever cheese you love, it kind of just binds with it and makes those flavors delicious. Okay, let's flip this guy. There we go. Give that a quick kind of saute on there, and then I'm going to take this whole pan, pop it in the oven, and we're going to pull out our squash because those will be ready to kind of decorate up, and then it will be time for us to serve dinner after that. We'll get our last little sear off these edges. Again, gives you a much better flavor on that kind of that grizzle part on there. It lets that fat release into the pork chop and just gives it a lovely flavor. Let me turn this guy off. We're going to lay these all down. I'm going to put my first set of pork chops back in here. There we go. And let's go pop these in the oven. And we'll grab our squash out. Beautiful. I can see that. Oh, this guy's heavy. We're going to put them right there. I have my air fryer set on 425, which is going to cook those pork chops, finish them off. But when I said you know they're done is when you push on the skin and it goes in a little bit. That's when you know it's nice and soft. So you can do it with your oven mitt. You can give it a little bit of a squeeze. Ooh, you see how I squeeze it there and they go right in? That's when you know they're done. So I'm going to flip these guys over, but be careful flipping them over because they are nice and hot and steamy. So grab a spatula. And you see we've got this just steamy deliciousness. They're nice and tender on the inside here. And there we go. Beautiful. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a little pat of butter inside each one. Sprinkle a little bit of brown sugar and a little bit of garlic salt. And that's all you need. Let me grab a little spoon here. And it is so good. And I will say, you got to use the mixture of the salt and the sugar for this because it really does bring that flavor together.
You have a question? Can that type of squash be diced and roasted as well?
It has a slightly different texture. It doesn't have the same quite texture as like a butternut squash. It's definitely more stringy and gritty, so it doesn't work as well diced. It's one that kind of needs to steam together, but you can definitely scoop it out and then like make a mash out of it, which is also, that's essentially what we're doing with this, which makes it delicious. But again, it's not one that you can easily peel and dice with it. Let's grab my brown sugar here. Now, the normal way of doing the brown sugar is you're going to put like, a teaspoon of brown sugar in each one. You don't need a whole lot unless you're my son and he is like, put a whole tablespoon in there. But this is already a naturally sweet squash. And so it kind of really picks up on it. So you don't need a whole lot in there. Now, with Teddy, he loves to come around and just try to eat the brown sugar out of it. And I'm always like, you got to eat the whole thing together. And then a little bit of garlic salt. That sweet and the savory just pair so well with it. And again, a very light sprinkle. It's like not even a fourth of a teaspoon. And you can also use just straight up salt too. You don't have to use garlic, but I do like that garlic and that sweetness to it. Okay. Let's get our Brussels sprouts are here. Let me get.
You have a question? Could you use maple syrup instead of brown sugar?
Yes, you could definitely use maple syrup. Honestly, really, a sweetener of choice, honey would also work really well with it. It just depends on what flavors you want to bring with it. Okay. Look at our beautiful cheesy polenta. As you see, you kind of got that nice kind of stickiness from that cheese in there, but it's going to be so light and fluffy. I'm going to go grab our pork chops out of the oven, and then we can serve up because, again, they don't need long in here. Here we go. Beautiful. But these are our kind of our brown sugar, paprika, chili powder, Creoles, kind of seasoned pork chops. And now I'm going to grab my plate and we can serve up dinner. Okay. So let me get everything turned off over here. Beautiful. Let me grab. And I'm just going to slide this over so that I have a little bit more space. Okay. I've got tongs, tongs, tongs. Perfect. Okay. For dinner tonight, we have our delicious brown sugar and Cajun spiced thick pork chops that we pan-seared and then finished off in the oven. We're going to be serving it with our oven roasted acorn squash, where we put butter, brown sugar, and garlic salt in it for this just sweet and savory, delicious squash. We have our bacon Brussels sprouts, which we quartered our Brussels sprouts and then we fried them up in our bacon grease. And then, of course, the best part, I think, we also have our cheesy polenta, which is going to pair so well with our pork chops. And then, of course, to top it all off, we'll take a nice slice, or pull, I should say, of our delicious, look how soft and fluffy, 1 hour or quick challah bread. Again, that recipe card is available for everybody on there. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of our recipes at home, you can go to that video and you can search for what we cooked. So our pork chops and polenta, and you can watch and cook along with me again. We also have on our page a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different products in there. So we've got our pans, our knives, our cutting boards, all the different things that we like use in our kitchen. And I almost forgot to put our little green onions on top of our pork chops here. I'm going to sprinkle them over the rest. But again, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. And don't forget to like and subscribe.